All right, so what I'm going to do is quickly go over the material in Chapter 1. And I'll do a couple things, but not real much. And again, hopefully it's not too much of a hardship if you don't have a machine, that you get a machine as soon as possible. All right, this book is broken up into, what, 4 or 5 sections? 6 sections, all right? So again, the idea is today we get through this week we get through as much of Section 1 as possible, which are the first 3 chapters. And as the author says here, when you complete this section, you should have a general understanding of how to use Visual Studio, how to develop a forms application. That's it. You are not a programmer per se after going through these first 3 chapters. Okay? So again, the chapter starts by showing you Visual Studio and giving you a tour. Now, notice it says here Visual Studio 2015. The one I'm having you download is the latest and greatest, which is 2019. Some of the pictures, some of the stuff has changed a little bit. Don't worry about that. You'll never be tested on where is this on the screen. That's not what this is about. But when you do bring it up, it'll look like this. That's my granddaughter, so you get to see her a lot of the time. All right. So it'll come up and it'll look something like this. All right. Again, it may not look exactly like, it's not a big thing one way or the other. You'll notice I've got a bunch of stuff here because these are projects I've already created. All right. But you'll at least see this. And when you get started, if you're not even sure where to start, there's a search over here that you'll see too. But what we'll do, and we'll do this tomorrow, don't even worry about following along or anything. If you just watch for now, we'll create a new project. All right? And then it'll come up, and in here, this is where it looks a little bit confusing when you see all this stuff. All right? Console app, .NET, core, etc. All this stuff in here. Why? Because what has happened is over time, there's been a lot of changes in the way that a lot of this stuff has been set up. I will tell you for 2017 and 2015, if you look in here in the pictures, they don't even show this stuff. They used to not have anything like this. This is fairly recent. All right, but notice if I just type in console. Oops, console. See how that changes? All right, so you are able to go in there. We do not, for what we're working with, it's not a warning, but I'm just telling you, never choose .NET Core. That's for what used to be the class that follows this one. All right, so you don't want to choose that. So if I come through here, and I'm just going to choose this, for example, right there. I'm going to say where it says .NET Console App right there. I'm just going to click on that. And then I'll click Next. And it says, what do you want to call this? So it says project name. That is the name, basically, of the folder that will hold everything. All right? So let's just have something. I'm going to make this real simple. I'm going to create something right in front of your very eyes. I'm going to call it odds or evens. Couple things. If you notice in here, don't put blank spaces in names. All right? And that'll be for file names. That'll be for folder names. If it is okay to put blank spaces, I'll typically tell you. All right? But you're best off not putting it. So I've run those together. You have to make like the O and the O. What I'm showing you is typically the way that it'll be done. So odds or evens. Then here is where you want to place it. Now I want to put mine on my desktop, so I could go in here and click the ellipsis here and change it. But since I've used the desktop before, now I can use the down arrow and just choose my desktop. Make sense? All right. Now what happens when you create this? Just so you know, this is like near the end of the semester. But what you're going to create is what's called a solution. And a solution can contain one or more projects. All right? Since right now we're only working with one project, it's totally fine to name your solution the same thing as your project. And if you say, I don't know what you mean, you're going to see it in about 30 seconds. All right? And place solution and project in the same directory. I don't even remember what that does. The framework, just keep it to the default and click create. That's it. It's going to look a little bit different when we do, there's going to be more stuff here. I'm going to move this over. There's going to be more stuff here when we do the GUI stuff, just so you know. All right? Now, again, I don't expect you to remember all this. I'm just showing it to you. This is your work area right in here. This stuff, it's all movable, dockable, so you can move stuff around. I recommend just leave it where it is until you get used to what you're doing. All right? This is called your Solution Explorer. So everything that can go in here is shown here. All right? There's also a Team Explorer. I'm not going to get into that right now. This is your error area. So if you make an error in your code, it'll show in here. So why don't make errors? Well, you can close that then. All right? And there'll be some other ones. You can close all of them if you really want to. There, it'll give you some more room. Mine right here now says View Server Object Explorer. Well, it's also where you put your toolbar. See, so notice if I click here, see how it changes to the toolbar? And it says, why doesn't it show anything there? You only have a toolbar with tools in it if you're making a GUI application. We're not making a GUI application, so it won't see it. Yes? GUI, Graphical User Interface. All right, so right now this just looks a little bit funky. Okay, so what I want to do basically is I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it number. It doesn't have any significance other than it's called number. And it's going to be a whole number, so I'm going to say that it's an integer, which means whole number. So I'm going to say int number equals 23. All right, and now I'm going to put a, notice I get red here, it's expecting a semicolon right there. All right, as soon as I put that in, that goes away. Now, notice that's green. Red is an error, green is a warning. Why don't they make yellow? I didn't write the software. But green means there's something in there that could potentially become an error. What it is right here is it says you created this variable number, you're not using it anywhere in the program. So as soon as we use it, which we'll do in a minute, all right, as soon as we do that, that'll go away. No, what it's saying is right now you're not doing anything with this. Oh. So notice that there's a little light bulb here. If you click the light bulb, it says you don't really need it, so there you can remove it if you don't want it. All right. But now what I want to do is, if I want to tell if a number is odd or even, I'm going to divide it by 2. And if there's a remainder, of 1, it's odd. If there's no remainder, it's even. Now all of you can look in here and say it's odd. You're not a computer. You're better than any computer. Whether you think you are or not, you are. All right? But the computer has the intellect of about an 18-month-old child. Seriously. That's about the number of words it understands, etc. And like with an 18-month-old child, because I know I'm dealing with it, that one is 2.5. When she does something wrong, yelling at her isn't going to help. I found that out over last weekend when I was babysitting her. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say if, oops, I don't know how it got there, but it did. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say if I take that number and I divide it by 2, and if after I do that it's equal to 1, then I'm going to get an error. Don't worry, I'll show you how to fix it in a minute. I'm going to say system.out. Oh, what is it? It's console, not system. Console.writeLine. Again, we'll get this error out of there in just a minute. WriteLine, and I'm going to say the number is odd. Else, grab that. And I'm going to say the number is even. Okay, does that make sense, what we're doing? Any questions on that? Now, you might say, well, what's main? We're going to get into all that stuff. But I just wanted to show you what a GUI program would look like. Okay? Now, there's a few things. First of all, every time I run this, it's going to use 23. That makes sense? Because I said it. I don't like that. I'll show you how to change that in just a second. All right? So every time I run this, it's going to say the number is odd. But it's worse than that. Because right now, the way that this works, if I run it, it's going to say the number is odd. It's going to disappear so fast you're not even going to see it. Okay? Why? Because when you get done with this, you have to say console.readline, which means basically stop until I hit enter. So if I did this right, I haven't written a console program in about a year, but that's still fine. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to do a file, save all, or notice I can click the double disk icon. Either one will work fine. And then to run it, I just click this green thing right here that says start. And it comes up and it says what? The number is odd. That's it. All right. And as soon as I hit enter, that disappears. You'll notice I'm going to comment this out, which is 2 slashes. Without that read line there, if I run it again, I don't know, maybe you're that good that you could read that, but you see what happens. All right? All right. Couple things. Let's just go through the whole program. These are files that get provided for the program. Now, when I say files, that basically what it is it's certain things that exist in the system that automatically get provided under properties and under references. They're automatically provided to the program. If you don't need them, you'll know how. Because anything that's in here that's gray, see how that's gray and that's black? Anything that's gray isn't needed. So if we didn't want those, we could come and click up here, click there on the light bulb and say, remove unnecessary usings. Or you could comment them out, or you could leave them in. Because students always ask, well, is it hurting anything if I leave them in? Not a bit. All right, it's totally fine. All right, notice the next it says namespace, odds or evens. The namespace is basically that name that's right there, name of your project. All right, I'm being very general here, and you'll learn other things as we get into this. Okay? This is the solution. This is the project that's in the solution. You'll notice if I right mouse click where it says solution, if I wanted to, I could say add, and I could tell it to add another project. I don't want to do that. We'll look at having 2 projects in the same solution much later in the semester. All right? Okay. C# is what is known as an object-oriented programming language. What does that mean? It means it uses classes and it uses objects. Okay? What's a class? A class, for lack of better words, is like a blueprint. If you were going to get a brand new house that you bought a lot and you had an architect come out, I would feel pretty bad really if the architect came out with a person and they started digging right away and I didn't even see a plan yet for the house. So that's basically what a class is. It is a blueprint. And from that blueprint, you make what are called objects. All right? And this is not a great example of showing you this, but you'll see it as we go on, okay? Just like if I made a person object, all right? Then a person object would contain 2 types of things: properties, height, weight, eye color, hair color, gender, stuff like that, and what are called methods. Those are behaviors: eat, sleep, drink, etc. All right? So we've got a class that by default, when you create a console program, the class is called program. It just calls it that by default. Can you go in and change it? I never have. Probably you could, but I never even tried. All right? Okay, like I said, if you say at the end of the period, okay, I understood it when you were talking about, I don't remember a darn thing, it's fine. It really and truly is. All right, this language uses curly braces basically as bookends. So the curly brace here goes with the curly brace here, etc. as you work your way down. Morning, go ahead. Does that make sense? So again, you'll see curly braces all over the place. Just so you know, as an example here, if I have only one statement like I have here, technically I could have done this without the curly braces, and it would have worked fine. They're the else. See that? Now, I like to use them because it removes any doubt. And if you have more than one statement here, you must put the curly braces. All right. So, again, using this basically says anything that's available under system. You may say, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to remove this. Watch my lines here and here. Watch these two lines right there and there when I remove this. See that? Because console is defined under system. So in other words, now I can just type in here system dot, and those errors will go away. So it's just a little bit of a shortcut. That's really all it is. All right. In fact, I'm going to put that using back up here again. Just hitting Control Z to bring it back. I'm going to just bring them all back there. And I'm going to add one more here. Using static system.console. You don't have to put this in. See how I've got that? Now, all I have to say is write line or read line. So in many ways, what we're doing is, the reason I'm using this is that using static system.console, that defines read line, that defines write line. So if I don't have it in, the system doesn't know necessarily where to look for it. For lack of better words, that's what I'm telling you. All right. Then what's left is what's in here. So let's just break it down a line at a time. This says static void main string bracket args. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Static, for lack of better words, for right now, static means one. There's only one of these. There's only one main. Everybody shares it. Okay? That's all we care about for right now. There's one main. Everybody shares it. Okay? Main in this language is known as the point of entry for the program. So for any C# program to work, whether it's a console like I just showed you, or whether it's a GUI, a graphical user interface program, must have a main in it. So you'll even see that tomorrow when we go in and start looking at some GUI stuff. All right? String bracket args. It is possible when you write these programs to run them from a command line. So to run them, literally run it from here. And when you run it from there, you can add things to it. So let's say that I wanted to take, and I know all your first names, so I wanted to type all of them in and have them in alphabetic order. But I didn't want to enter them in alphabetic order. All right, so I said Keegan, Angie, Dominic, Chris, Maya. Okay, something like that. I hit enter, boom, and all of a sudden it prints in alphabetic order. If I want to do something like that, I enter them in here. That's what this is used for. All right, what this means is we have what's called an array of strings that's called args. Again, don't worry about remembering that. Are we going to use that? Never. But I'm just telling it to you for completeness. In fact, it's not explained in our book until quite a ways into the book. All right? All right. Again, we've got our curly braces, which are our bookends, so to speak. And then here we're creating a variable. We could have called this anything we wanted to. I could have called this just N. I could have called it Jeff. It doesn't matter. One of the things I expect is when you're working with this stuff, you will give your variables meaningful names. Because what that does is, at least in part, it helps in self-documenting a program. So again, I could have said here X for that, X, etc. I could have done that. But it would have been harder to figure out what X was. Now in a program this small, no, it wouldn't have been hard to figure out. But as you start getting bigger and bigger programs, yeah, it would get harder and harder to figure out. There are times when I let you use a variable that's called X, Y, Z, or whatever. We'll get to that later. All right? So again, what this is doing is it's creating a variable. That variable must be a whole number. And it actually must be between, it's like negative 4 billion something and positive 4 billion something. But notice if I come in here and I put 0.5, I get an error. And what it's going to tell me is, hey, you said that was an int. You can't put a decimal place inside of an int. I don't understand what you're trying to do. So what if I wanted to put that in there? Then instead of an int, I'd either have to make this what's called a float. All right. And if I do that, then I've got to put an F there, meaning that it's a float. Or what most programmers do, put the word double in there. All right. And again, I'm just going over this stuff. Don't worry about memorizing it. All right. But I'm going to go put it back and make it an int. So it's a whole number that's holding 23. Okay. Then I'm just asking the computer a question. This example that's right here, this is kind of like you're going down the road ends, and you've got to go one way or the other. We're going to assume it's a one-way street, so you can't back up. This says, yes, the number is divisible. When you divide it, yes, there is a remainder of 1. No, there is not a remainder of 1. That's exactly what we're saying to it. But again, you have to be unbelievably specific when you are putting something like that in and telling the computer. It cannot infer anything. I always tell students, you might laugh at this. Again, I'm not trying to be funny here. I still remember a friend of mine. I said, wow, is your girlfriend pregnant? Kinda. Well, no. She was or she wasn't, right? Computers don't know kinda. So you have to be specific. Notice if I leave this out, you say, wow, it worked. No, it didn't. And you two, Maya and Keegan, you might want to look at this, because this is where we used var, and I didn't tell you that. Your programs, by and large, would have worked in JavaScript, even if you never used the word var. But this language is called strongly typed. What that means is the system needs to know from the get-go what kind of variable you're working with. All right, that's why we need the int in there. Now, there's different kinds of ints. I don't want to go through it and bore you with that now, but there's probably 4 or 5 kinds of ints. What's the difference? How big a number can they hold? There's one called a byte, B-Y-T-E, that can hold like negative 128 to, or negative, 128 to positive 127. All right. There's one called short, which holds negative 32,768 to positive 32,767. Most of the time, most programmers just use int. Okay. All right. So again, if 23, so it takes that 23, basically makes a copy of it and puts it in right there. So it says if that 23 is divisible by, this is an operator. It's a percent sign. It's called modulo. It's also known as the remainder operator. I don't know about you, but I remember back in school where we had to do this. And we first learned long division, and you put 10 here, you had 20, etc. And you came back, it was a 3, and then you put a 1 and 1. So you'd say the answer was 11R1. That's what modulo gives you, is that remainder. Is it used a lot? It depends on the application. Think about when it might be used. If I was doing a program with dollars and cents, I could divide something or modulo it, depending on what I was trying to do, by 100. Okay? So if I had 77 cents, it's not a dollar. So if I say 77 modulo 100, it's going to give me 77. Okay? If I have 777 cents, and I divide that by 100, it'll give me 7. And if I modulo it, it'll give me 77. This is what you're going to see as we start working through this stuff. All right? So I'm saying if I divide it by 2 and there is a remainder of 1, notice there's 2 equal signs. There's 2 there and there's 1 here. This line right here is known as I'm doing 2 things. If all I did right here, I'm just going to remove this for right now. That's called, right there, declaring a variable. I'm declaring a variable called number, and I'm saying that it's a whole number variable. That's what it's going to hold. Once I put this in there, I am both declaring the number here and initializing the number here. So when you initialize something, you use a single equal sign. When you want to test something, so I want to test, is this whole thing equal to this? Then I need two equal signs. Again, you'll get it, because notice if I leave one off, see that? System doesn't know. It basically is going to come back and say, the left-hand side must be a variable, a property, or an indexer. It doesn't understand, because it thinks you're trying to take number right here, and you're trying to assign this to it. And it's totally confused. All right? So if there is a remainder of 1, we're going to write down that it's odd. Otherwise, we're going to write down that it's even. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you in just a second how we can even add to this, but what if the number had been 0? All right? So if I make this a 0, what do you think it's going to say? Anybody want to take a wild guess? Let's look. Because there is no remainder of 1. Now, some people would look at that and say, that isn't right. 0's not odd and 0's not even. All right? So we could have come in at first and done this. We could have said, if the number is equal to 0, then we could have come in and we could have said, what? Right line. The number 0 is neither odd nor even. Just something like that. All right? So that would have handled that, but then it still would have gone through and it would have done all this. I don't want it to do all that. So I could come down there and say this. I could say else. All this will automatically move over in just a second. See that? So now, if the number that I put in is 0, so let's try it. Put a 0 in there. See that? All right. On the other hand, if I make it back to 23 again, okay? So part of the first, the stuff that's in chapters 1, 2, and 3 is to get you to start thinking like the computer thinks. All right? Because again, I've heard this, well, computers are much smarter than I am, because I can tell a computer to multiply 567 by 133 and it can do it like that. I can't do that. That's true. But that's not saying it's smarter than you. That's saying that it can do things faster than you can do them. All right? But again, if when you start putting in artificial intelligence and stuff like that, maybe, who knows, maybe that's why some of you are even here right now. Maybe that's what you want to get into, which is great. All right, I've got a student in the 4th semester of the program. He wrote for his Android app that students have to create. He made an artificial intelligence app. He liked it so much. He had job offers, but he didn't take them. All right, he's from Kentucky, and he went back to Murray State because he's getting his 4-year degree and he's majoring in artificial intelligence. All right, the project that he was doing was, I couldn't help him because I didn't know any of that stuff, and I told him that, and I was kind of kidding with him one day. I said, you ought to just contact Google. He did, and they got back to him. He actually got to meet a couple Google engineers electronically based on what he was doing. All right. So now, if this is true, what's in blue there, if that's true, we totally skip this. Does that make sense to you? because it has to. All right? That's like here. I mean, imagine here if we said, and again, I'm not trying to be politically incorrect, but if I said, for example, in here, if gender is F, write you're a female, else write you're a male. All right? Again, I'm not saying anything about people transitioning or whatever. I don't care about that right now. I'm just saying that when you write something like this to the computer, it either has to do this and has to skip all this, or if this is false, it has to do all this. And what it's checking on is this. That's what's known as a Boolean condition. Boolean meaning true or false. All right. So what goes in the parentheses there has to be true or false. It can't be kinda. All right. The computer just doesn't understand that. All right. So again, that's just a Boolean check. So if I get in here, what do I know? I know that whatever number is wasn't 0. I don't know if it's more or less, and it doesn't matter. I just know that now I want to take that number, divide it by 2, and check the remainder. And if the remainder is 1, I want to write this. And if the remainder is not 1, it's got to be 0. So I want to write it like this. That's the whole program. Again, that's pretty simple, but I just wanted you to understand what we were doing. All that makes sense?
Yeah. Can you put if number divided by 3 is 1, why put that, like that under or after else?
After the else? Because if I did an else, if I did an else, right, I could have put it up here.
No,
all right.
One underneath
this one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so why is that else in there?
Well, why didn't you give the number divided by 2 and
oh, and then put another else down here. Okay, I only want to do this if the number wasn't 0, correct?
No.
All right, so if I put that down there, if I move that over and made this one else and I made this one else, first of all, you can't do that. You can only have one else, but you can have as many else ifs as you want. So I could have put another condition there. All right? No, they're good questions though, and I appreciate it. But what I'm asking is, looking at it, does what's happening here make sense? All right? And again, this last read line, if you already saw, if I left that out, the system doesn't know to stop. It does it, boom, it's done. Okay? That's why that read line is in there. All right? Now, one thing you'll notice, you did notice it, we just ran this, is when you write a console program, there's no GUI. All right? It's totally non-graphical. So, I'm going to come back, I'm going to save this, all right? I'm going to do a file, and I'm going to close my solution, okay? And I'm going to recreate this as a GUI so you can see the difference between them, all right? So, I'm going to create a new project, all right? And when we do this, we don't want a console application, all right? And I'm trying to remember, does it say GUI in here? Well, that isn't what we want. And you could, if you look in here, it's not small, all right? There's quite a few things to check. So just give me a second, I'll just have to remember what it is. That's it. We want a Windows Forms app, but not .NET Core. So I'm going to type in here Forms. See what that gives me. Well, what do we have? Console app? No, it's giving me almost everything I had. So nope. So I'm going to type in Windows Forms. That looks a little better. All right. You always want to choose the one that says .NET Framework. Also, remember the language we're using? C#, see that? Don't choose this because that's Visual Basic.net. That's another language. When Microsoft first created the .NET language or the .NET framework that we're using, VB.net was the big language. Over time, C# has supplanted it. It is the big language. All right? So we want Make sure that it's C#, but we don't want the .NET Core. We want this one. So I'm going to click Next. And you can see it looks pretty similar to what we just saw before. And also notice it already changed to desktop. Now, if I type in here, odds or evens, and if I tell it to save it, I'm going to have a problem, because I already have one called odds and evens. All right, so I'll just change this to odds and evens GUI. You know, what you call it again isn't that important. All right, and I'll click Create. And you'll notice right away, well, that looks a lot different. All right. Again, the stuff that you see in here, not only is it dockable, but notice this is my form. This is where I'm going to write my program. I can take that and make it almost any size I want. I can take this. One of you is going to do this, purposely or accidentally. You can go, I wonder what happens if I click on here. Oh, dang it, I didn't mean to do that. Everybody does it. So if you do that, the easiest way to fix it is you go to Tools, and you go to, I think it's Options. I'll get it, but it'll take me 30 seconds to figure it out. Tools, Import and Export Settings. And you tell it, oh, I want to reset all my settings, and I don't want to save what I'm working on. I just screwed it up. So I say no, say Next. Make sure it's Visual C#, say Finish. And it'll put everything nicely back where it belongs. Now, one of you is going to do that and forget what I just told you, and it's okay. Just raise your hand. All right? So I want to show you a few things about this. This is called your form. Now notice when I bring up Toolbox, see how it changes? And don't worry, this is going to move over in just a minute. It says, what do you want? Well, I want all Windows forms. So those are all the tools that I can put in here. All right? The problem is I can't see this now. Well, I can click on here and drag it, but I still can't see all of it. So I could close this. Now I can see it, but now I can't see my tools. So I click again. It's not showing now, so I click on View, and I tell it to view my toolbox. There it is. And if you notice up here, in the middle, there's something that looks like a push pin. You see that? See what that does? It makes it stay where it was. All right, so this is the toolbox. As we get more into it, there's other things that can go there. If in your heart of hearts, if you say, I want this Solution Explorer over there and I want the toolbox over there, you can move them. And if you don't like them, I just showed you how to move them back. All right? This is your form. This is your area in which we're going to draw the GUI in just a minute. Then this is broken into two different areas. Okay? This right here is called your Solution Explorer. And it's letting you know that right now, the file we have up is form1.cs design. You say, oh, that's this one. No, it ain't. That's the stuff in the background that's being built because, or from this. Typically, you don't want to open that file. Just so you know. All right? Where you actually put your code is in here, form1.cs. All right? And don't worry when I click it. We'll get it to move in just a second. All right. Notice there's still a program.cs. See that? Like we had before. But now, notice what it has in it. It's got a main. It automatically gets built for you in a GUI. You should never have to go into, in this class, go into that file and do anything. It's just there. Now, if I don't want that open anymore because I don't want to take a chance of screwing it up, just click the X. I didn't remove it. I just closed it. All right. Then down here, so this is your Solution Explorer. Down here, this is called your Properties window. What does that mean? Well, right now, the name of my form is Form 1. That's the name of it. Not because it says this there, because if I go up to the top, it says the name is Form 1. Well, I don't want it to be called Form 1. I want it to be called Form Odds and Evens. Okay? So I just changed it. Notice if I do come in here, and if I put in spaces, and I hit Enter, Doesn't like that. When you're naming certain things, you can't use spaces. So as soon as I click OK, changes it back again to Form 1. All right, so I'm just going to call this, again, Form Odds and Evens. Hit Enter. Now it changed the name. Well, oops, well, I goofed up. There we go. Hit Enter. Now it's been changed. Okay? And how do I know that? I just know it from looking right here. But notice that didn't change. Because the property, the name property, it's like that's your name. All right? If somebody puts your name on a piece of paper, and instead of putting in Angie, they put Angela, you go, that's not my name. Well, it doesn't matter. All right? So if I want to change what's up there, then I go down here and I look in my properties and I find one that's named text. And I say, this form will show if the inputted number is 0, odd, or even, for example. See how it changed? All right. So I come in here and I do all this stuff. And now I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I don't have a number. I don't have anything here. Well, let's put a few things in here. Let's think about, and this is nice because I've got this empty. I'm going to build my interface. And I'm going to put a label right here that says enter a number. So I'm going to have a label there in just a minute that looks like that. Then I'm going to have a text box right here where I put the number in. All right. Then I'm going to have another label here that says the number is, and I'm going to have another text box right here. So if I put 23 here, it should say odd. Does that make sense? But how does it know that? Well, I'm going to have some buttons here. I'm going to have a button here that says calculate. I'm going to have another button here that says clear. And I'll have another button here that says exit. All right? So I have to put code associated with that button. So when it clicks it, it checks that value, tries to divide it by 2, and sees if there's a remainder. If there is no remainder, it's going to put even there. If there is a remainder of 1, it's going to put odd there. Does that make sense? So I do all that stuff. Boom. All works fine. I click clear. I want 3 things to happen. I want that to clear. I want that to clear. And I want my mouse to be right there. So I can put in another number and try it again. All right? And when I click exit, depends on how literal I want to be. I can click exit and literally program ends. But that's pretty harsh. What if somebody clicked the exit button accidentally? So what we're going to do is when they click that exit button, we're going to have a message come up and says, are you sure you want to exit the program? Does that make sense? All right. And I'll leave that up there so you can kind of see it as I'm making this. And again, this is what we're going to start doing tomorrow. I'm just showing it to you now. All right. You know, you were late because you were down in St. Louis. They went to basically the same orientation you went to. They had it again for about an hour, which she said was going to be an hour, which was almost an hour and a half, but whatever. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look at these different things. The things that says enter a number and the number is, those 2 things are called labels. All right? Just like, you know, if somebody was writing a letter and they asked me my gender, my label might be Mr. type of thing. Okay? So I'm going to come in here and look for labels. Oh, there's a label. All right, so I'm going to put a label there. Just move it over here. Don't worry about how small it is. And I'm going to put another one basically right underneath it. All right. Now, there's a lot of ways that I can make this label bigger. But I'm just going to, because I'm just trying to be real simple right here. First thing I want to do is I want to name that. Label 1 is a crummy name. All right. So I'm going to change that from label 1. Let's see, it says enter a number. Okay, we'll call it label. Enter a number. Okay, not number. Number. So there's my first one. Okay, so I have now changed the name. How do I know that? Look at the name right here. See that? I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to just keep this one simple. I'm going to call this label output. Okay? In fact, let's just make the first one simple too. We'll call them label input and label output. All right? Now, if I look in here, I click, come on, get off of there. If I click right here and I go down to that text property again, you'll see it still says label 1. Well, I want it to say enter a number. Enter a number. And you can see how it changed. I don't know what's going on with that. I might have made a... Let me make that again. So label input. And if it doesn't work, I'll show you the other way that we can change the size, which you're going to learn this stuff and you're going to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to type in here, enter a number. All right, and again, I'm not sure why it's, I think I know why it's doing that. We're going to fix this right now. So I'm going to click on this, and you'll notice, because this is one of the places why I don't like Microsoft. Because sometimes they put in things that are counterintuitive to the way you and I think. Okay? So, I'm on this label input. What I want to do is I want to be able to resize this. Does that make sense? So I come in here, I click, it doesn't let me resize it. So I've got to go down to the property or up to the property that's called Autosize. If you want to resize something, you have to set it to false. To me, why didn't they make it false? And if you want to resize it, set it to true. But because they're Microsoft. All right. So I'm going to double click on where it says the auto size. And notice now I can make it nice and big. See that? And I can do all sorts of fun things with it. I can center it. I can change the font type. You're going to learn all that. I don't really care right now. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to immediately go over to this one. And I'm just going to set the auto size right away to false. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to come in here, and that one is supposed to say the number is. And you'll notice, no, it's got to be wider. There we go. Okay. So you can see I kind of put them right over the other ones. Not purposely, but just the way that it worked out. So I've got that. Now I want to find what's called a text box. And a text box holds input or output. All right, so there is one, and here is another. All right, again, just like before, I want to give them better names. So I call this label input. So I'm going to call this one, and I don't have to do this. Since it goes with that one, I'm going to call this text box input. And since that one is called label output, I'm going to call this one text box output. All right, so you can see, erase that. This is real picky here, this, just so you know, and I shouldn't, I bumped it. So let's see if it comes back on. We got a whole big wireless system, and the wireless doesn't work. So we went back to doing it manual by plugging this in. All right, so we've got that. All right, so what's left? Well, you can look and know what's left, right? I have to make 3 buttons. So, drag a button out here. Object reference is not set to the instance of an object. Okay. So there's one button, and I could drag 2 more out. That's just fine. Or I can use from Windows Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and make my buttons that way. Notice I get these little guides here to try to make me line up stuff like little soldiers. That's kind of nice. All right, so I've got that, and I want the first one to be called what? How about button calculate? And for the text that's on here, I've never seen it do this kind of thing before. That's just weird. All right, I'm going to put here for the text, calculate. All right, so that's fixed. The second one, I'm going to put for the text, clear. And I'm going to call the button clear. And then finally for the last one, I'm going to call it button exit. And for the text that's here, I'm going to put exit. All right, does all that make sense? Now, there's all sorts of stuff I can do here just to show you. Like I said, I'll probably lose you when you start working on this because I can make this bigger or smaller. So I see I'm starting to customize it. All right. Once I look at it and I'm like, that's the way I want it to look. I don't want to be able to move a doggone thing. Once I've done that, now I can go hold down on my left mouse button, and this is called lasso it. So highlight all of it like that, right mouse click and choose lock controls. Now they can't move. Okay, so I've got that. So notice, if I click now, see how it doesn't move? Okay. Now I come in here, you know what? I don't really like the colors. So I click on my form, and I come back again, and I say, oh, let's see, background color. I click there, and I go all the way to custom, and I can make it any doggone color I'd like. So let's make it a light purple. See that? So you can go in there. You can do that with everything that's here. All right. And now what you'll notice if I run this, so I'm going to do a file, and I'm going to tell it to save all, and I'm going to tell it to run. First thing is, I don't like where that is. I want that to be right here in the middle. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. But notice if I put 23 here, and I click, I haven't put any code yet in there yet. So the system doesn't know what to do. We're going to fix that in a second. The first thing, though, is I want this to appear right in the middle. So I'm going to click on the form here, and I'm going to tell it, as I go down here, it says here, what do you want your start position to be? And I'm going to click there. Notice I get a down arrow, and I want it to be in the center of the screen. So now once I've done that and I run it, it's pretty obvious what the change was. All right, so we've got that done. All right, now the biggest mistake every one of you in here is going to make it sometime or other, I make it, is now if I want to bring up the code for this, I can do this two ways. I can right mouse click on here and choose view code, and there's my code window. That's totally fine. Some people like to do it like that virtually all the time, which again is just fine. All right. Other times people like to double click on something. So notice when I double click, not only does it bring up my code window, but it brings up the code window for the calculate button. All right. And I'm going to do it again, and I'll bring it up for the clear button, and I'm going to do it again, and I'll bring it up for the exit button. See that? But what every one of you will do at one time or another is you'll double click on here. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, dang it. So you can leave it there, but you've got some code there that shouldn't be there. Does that make sense? So I'll just highlight it and remove it. Don't do that. Because if you just highlight this and remove it, it does remove it. But remember that file that I told you about, this designer file? It doesn't remove it from there. Well, just go in there, don't touch that file. The way that you will actually remove it, the way you should remove it, is to go back to your window like this, okay? Find that, and then when you look over here, it's kind of hard to see. But if you look right here, you've got five different things with that wrench. I want to click the one that looks like a lightning bolt right there. And once I do, it's going to come in and it says, oh, click. When you click on it, see how there's something written here? There's nothing written in any of the other ones. That means that's there. Now I highlight it. Now it's gone. That's how you remove something. You're going to forget that too. But that's how you remove something. All right. So let's think about what we want to do here. First thing is, I'm not going to do it in order. But again, when I click this button that says clear, I want that to clear, I want that to clear, and I want the cursor to go right there. Does that make sense? I want those three things to happen. So First thing I want to have happen is I want my first text box. Now notice, this is called IntelliSense. All right? Because it's built into the system. As soon as I type in text box, whoops, I have to spell it right. Type in text box, it knows, oh, look what you've got. So what I want is I want for the input, text box input, dot, I want its text to be equal to nothing. Nothing. So I can either say double quote, which is called the empty string, which means nothing, or if you like to type, you can type in string dot empty. I don't ever use that because I don't like to type when I don't have to. You know, and again, it's the difference between 2 keystrokes and about 10. All right. So there's the first one. And then I want to say text box output dot text equals double quote. And then finally, where the mouse is, so I want the mouse to go here. That's called giving the mouse the focus. That's just what it's called. Again, you're going to learn all this stuff. I'm just trying to show you a few things, that's all. So I'm going to say text box input dot focus. Now notice that's called a method, so it needs parentheses so the system to know that. So this says clear out whatever's in there, and put the mouse back on here. Let's see if it works. So again, I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to run the program. And right now I'm just going to type in some garbage and some more garbage. And there's where my mouse is. You can see it. And I'm going to click clear. So they both cleared, and it put my cursor there. So that appears to have worked. All right. So that's, we got a third of the stuff done, basically, that we wanted to do. All right. Next, you can do these in any order you want. But I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say, let's see. I'll do exit next. Now, if I just type in this, application, I think it's application.exit. We're going to find out. All right. So if I put that in, again, you don't have to do this, but I like to save when I make changes. Run the program again, and I click exit. That's pretty harsh. All right. There's nothing wrong with it at all, but it's pretty harsh. All right. So I'm gonna need that line, but I'm gonna comment it out for right now. Notice when I commented it out, it got green. All right, because it's color. This is color coded. You'll notice that words like private and void and object. All right, when you notice them, they're blue. All right. Event args is its own thing. We'll talk about it another time. So now I can sit there and think, okay, how do I do this again? But a long time ago, I wrote myself an email so I wouldn't forget how to put this code in there. And I'll give you the code. It's like 2 or 3 lines. It's nothing big. So let's see. Of course, I can't find it now. Done. All right, I'll try to remember it myself. How's that? So I want to say if message box dot, that isn't it. Okay. Then I'll go to my buddy Google. How to close a GUI C# program using a message box. See that? Do you really want to exit? That's the kind of thing that we want to do. All right, so let's see. Of course, that'll probably be a 6 minutes long lecture.
Profit with JavaScript. A course that'll teach you how to master JavaScript and...
Hello guys, welcome once again. In the last video, I have shown you your form as you log, which is this variable.
That's what we want. Okay.
Result.
So I'm just grabbing his code. That must have bumped it again. Yeah, please keep telling me. So that's the code. So I'm going to steal that. Okay, he does it a little different than I would, but that's okay. I'll do it the way he did it. Dialog. Message box dot show exit program. Don't worry, this will look a lot better in a minute. Let the system figure that out for me. So. So it's going to give me some errors. Don't worry about that. We're going to fix them right away. So dialog, result. All right, dialog. We want a message box to come up. And we want it to say, do you want to exit now? That's what it'll say. And the title will be exit program. I'm going to put each one of these on their own line so you can see what I'm trying to do here. This will have a yes button and a no button.
Does that matter to you in the other way?
It doesn't matter, no. This is one of those times when it doesn't matter at all. And the icon dot, how about a warning? All right. Okay, so that'll fix that. Just to show you what we've done so far, just to show you. So I'm gonna save this and run it. All right, I am going to move this. Okay, I'm going to click exit and watch the stuff that's here. All right. Do you want to exit now? That's the text you put in there. All right. Exit program. That's the title. Yes, no. Those are the kind of buttons you want. I could have said, for example, message box buttons dot OK, and it would have made just one OK button, something like that. And message box dot warning. That's the icon. All right. So right now when I click it, it's not going to do anything because I haven't told it what to do. All right. So if this dialog, if it does equal yes, I want to end the program. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. I want to end the program. So now let's take a look at it. Okay, do I want to exit now? First I'm going to type in no, which should keep me here. Good. Do I want to exit? Yes. And I'm gone. So that's the code to do that. All right. So we have put in the code to handle our clear routine and to handle our exit. So the only thing that's left is the calculate. So let's do that right now. Now, this may sound a little weird to you, but when I run this program and I put this in, if I asked you what was put in there, if you asked me, I'd say 23. Okay, I don't know about you, but that's what I'd say it was. Technically, it's not. Anything you put inside of a text box is text. That's why it has the name. So it really is the string 2, 3. It's really not the number 23. Okay? Why does that matter? Well, what if I run it and I put in here, hello? All right, the program shouldn't even be able to do anything with that. Okay? But if I don't put anything in there to handle that, it's going to break. It's going to give me what's called an exception when I type in something non-numeric or I leave it blank. So let's see if we can even account for that. So I want to exit. Good, that still works. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to create a variable that's called number. So int number. Okay. And I'm going to say that is equal to whatever I put in here. Its value. Okay. So I'm going to say, whoops, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to say text box input dot text. Okay, doesn't like that because remember that right there, this is text, and I want to put it into an int. It doesn't understand how to do that. So for now, because I don't want to get too far off on this, but I'm going to come in here and say convert to int 32. Am I right here? Might be wrong. Okay. Generate class. No, we don't want to generate class. How about this? We'll just say here int. Doesn't like that. All right. All right, so doesn't like that either. All right. And it's not a dot here. I'm just trying to remember the convert. I should have checked on this before class. But I was going to do something totally different when we came back and we didn't have enough time. I just changed it on the way up here. So we'll figure it out. Just hold on a second. That's a crummy example. This is what I want to show you, but then I've got to go off on a 10-minute lecture that's way too long for what we're doing right now and way too complex. Okay. There it is. Convert dot. Oh, it's a dot. Okay. So it's convert dot to int 32, and then this in parentheses. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, I'll show you this, and it'll work, but I can still make it blow up real easily. So I'm going to show you both things. So I'm going to say here if number modulo 2 equal 1. You already saw that before. Then what I want to put in my text box output, all right, is I want to say dot text equals the number is odd. You already saw this before. All right. Else, and I'm not going to worry about 0 right now. We can add that. That's no big thing. I want to say that it's even. Okay. So let's run the program. Let's put a 23 in there. Calculate the number is odd. So it worked. Clear? That works. Let's put 24 in there. The number is even. I should make that a little wider, but you get the idea, right? Now, the problem is, if I come back in here and I type in, let's leave it blank. This is what's going to happen to all of you sooner or later. It happens to me all the time. This is called the exception assistant, and the system's trying to let you know you got a problem. And the problem was it was expecting a number because it tried to convert it to an integer, and there was nothing there. The same thing, the same exact thing would have happened if I would have run it and put in something like hello. See, I get the same thing. All right. So how do I fix that? Well, one way to do that is when I come in here and, when I come in here, come on, and I check this, I can check to see whether or not it's numeric. And if it's not numeric, I can refuse to allow that to happen. Okay? So what I wanted to show you, though, was kind of the guts here are the same guts that you saw in the other program. All right? Logic is logic, and it really doesn't matter what you're using. In other words, logic is logic, and it doesn't matter if you're doing a console program or you're doing a GUI program. All right? So what we're going to do tomorrow, not this one, but we're going to sit and first we're going to write 3 programs. First one will be unbelievably easy, and they'll get harder. And after we do that, I want you to write them with me. So if you have a machine, you've got one, you've got one, you've got one. I don't know if you can get one, okay. And I know, well, she sort of got one. All right, because, that's what I think of Apple. But actually, Apple makes a great machine, just not for this program. All right. But we're going to do that. All right. And then what we're going to do is, so we'll write about 3 programs. Then, and it's not a test, it's nothing. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 more, and I'm going to ask you to try to do them by yourselves. And I'll give you some time to work on them. Okay? And then I'll go over them with you. You won't have to turn those 3 in or anything, but we'll do that. All right? And then, there'll still be time left. We'll go and we'll look at how to do the same kind of thing, but how to do it using a GUI program. So we'll transition into GUI, so you can start to see, you've already started to see the difference. All right? Now, I'm sure if I was in Evan's class today, that probably the difference between what I just showed you and what he did, this is my guess, but it would be my guess, I'm trying, why is that pushed way over, I don't know. But is probably what he did was he spent a lot of time going over the chapter. I spent no time going over the chapter. I wanted to show you an example of it. So let's just take a look at what's in here. The thing about these books, just so you know it, typically almost every page that's in here, what they show you on the left-hand side is text. And on the right-hand side, they explain that text or show you a picture of that text in action. All right. In fact, Muroc calls them paired pages, just so you know. All right. So they talk about .NET applications, and that's not all that different from what I just showed you. Okay. One thing I did want to mention to you, just so you know. Okay, what if right now, what if I run that program that we just looked at? Okay, I'm going to run the program, and I'm going to put 23 in there. Okay, and I'm going to click calculate. It works, correct? But you know what? Doggone it. I just wish that was an even number. Well, now it is. So that wasn't really good that I allowed that to happen. So there's 2 ways, just so you know, there's 2 ways that I can fix that. One way is, instead of taking what's in here, instead of making that a text box, I make it a label. Because labels can't be written to, you can't change them once they've been set, basically. Not really true, but for now it is. The other way I can do it, and this is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to click on here. I'm going to go down to my properties window that's down here. Notice I still have that lightning bolt checked. I don't want that checked. I want to go back to, it's one of these. I think it's this one here. Maybe it's that one. It is. the one right next to the lightning bolt. And I want to find a property that's in there that's called read only. Notice it's set to false. I'm going to double click on it. Now it's set to true. See how it turned grayish? If I don't like that gray, I can make it another color, but I'll just leave it like that. Now notice if I come in here and I put in 23, okay, and I click calculate, okay, now I can't change it. All right. Couple more things just to make my life a little nicer as a programmer. I'm going to click on right here on a blank part of my form, and I'm going to go into my properties again, and I'm going to go and I'm going to find a property right near the top, and that property is called accept button. Okay, right now it's set to nothing, so I'm going to click here and I'm going to choose button calculate. I'm going to show you what they do in just a second. There's another one called cancel button, and I'm going to click on that one and I'm going to choose button clear. Why? Well, notice now if I come through here and I run this and I type in my 23, now all I'm going to do is hit the enter key. That's an accept button. So now what I did was I told the system, whenever I hit enter, act like you click the calculate button. Didn't have to do that, but it just makes it a little nicer. The other thing is the other one was cancel button. I can click clear, or not using the mouse, I'm going to hit my escape key. You don't have to do that, but it makes it a little nicer. All right. The other thing I want to do here is I'm going to stop my run. Okay. And I want when the program first starts to run, notice where the mouse is. That's good. But that was just lucky. I want to make sure as I tab my way through here that it goes in the order I want it to go in. Notice when I'm tabbing, can you see what's not being chosen? Those labels. See that? Labels cannot get the focus, so you can't tab to them when a program's running. Okay? But if I want to be able to set my tab order any way I want it to go from here, then to here, then to here, then to here. Okay? Is that the way it goes now? It's there, but I want it to go here next. Oops. It's not. I don't want it to go there. So I want to change the tab order. Okay? So what do? I click View, and I go down where it says Tab Order. And I want this to be set to 0. That means when the program starts, that's where it'll be. 1, 2, 3, 4. These don't even really matter, but I'll just make them 5 and 6. Then I've got those numbers stay there unless I do another View Tab Order. And I run the program. So now notice the difference. See that? Again, it's not that big a thing, but one of the things you should always be striving for as a programmer is to, if you're making a program for someone else to use, and I used to always say this and people laugh, but assume they're an idiot. And that's not really true. Assume they're naive and they don't know what they're doing. You say, well, that makes them an idiot. Well, maybe, but you get what I'm saying. All right? And this afternoon, I'm going to give almost the same lecture to my class and tell them the same thing, that when they're creating an app, don't assume that the person using the app is a wise user. And if you need proof of that, it's not an app, but I was having a talk with Charles about this last week. I got a woman inside of the Lake St. Louis Walmart mad at me because she was in front of me. Nothing to do with the fact she was a woman. I could care less. But she had no idea how to use her debit card. She kept putting it in, and the lady said, no, this was back before they had the chip. So she kept doing this, and she was doing it the wrong way. So as she was leaving, I asked the checker, I said, could you have a separate line for people who don't know how to use a debit card? Of course, she turned around and gave me a dirty look. But the point is, if I was creating an app for her, I wouldn't assume she knew how to use it. I should assume she doesn't know how to use it. All right. Eventually, we're going to go and we're going to add a menu to this, and we might have a help screen in here that tells somebody what to do. We can even, I'm not going to do it now, but we can set it up, for example, that if you put your mouse on there, a tooltip comes up that tells the user what they're supposed to do. All right. So there's a lot of different stuff that we can add in there. All right. So we are making Windows forms in this class. This first one, that's all we're doing in here. That and console apps. But we're not doing ASP.NET web forms. We're not doing ASP.NET MVC. We're not doing WPF. WPF is Windows. I don't remember what the P is. What's that? Presentation? Okay, there. Thank you. Windows, yeah, there, it's in here someplace. Presentation Foundation. They're just 3 different ways to write programs. That's all. All right. Visual Studio supports, these are the ones, again, the Community Edition is free. And it supports Visual Basic, Visual C Sharp, Visual C++, and I would ask, how many of you have ever heard of Visual F Sharp? They actually, when JavaScript came out, this was kind of Microsoft's attempt. They thought they could take over the JavaScript market too. And considering the fact that none of you in here have ever heard of Visual F Sharp, you can see how well that went. All right. And again, there's just some stuff in here, some history, etc. That's fine. So we're using the .NET framework. So you're using all this stuff, even if you don't realize it. The point is, the farther down you go, the more hardware it is. The farther up you go, the more user it is. Does that make sense? So this stuff down here, this is just the fact that it's running on a Windows operating system. All right. Then here we've got a class library. Some of this is in that using stuff that I showed you before. All right. And the stuff that's up here, that's what you write. Just so you're aware of that. All right. We've been spending a lot of time. I showed you the IDE. I don't expect you to remember a doggone thing about it. Really. So if we start tomorrow, you were watching. It's one thing to sit there and do. It's another thing to watch. All right. So they show how it's compiled and run. And it's going to be different, too, if it's a console app versus a GUI app. With a console app, you actually saw more of it than we did. The GUI app, it just either worked or it didn't work. All right, if you want to know more about that, that's cool. We'll talk about this. And here's the tour of the IDE, how to start it. But again, that's 2015. That's why I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. Since we're using 2019, I thought I can show you this, but that's changed now. Well, that's changed now, and I don't want you to get confused. And you might say, well, then why don't you just have us do 2015? Because we want you to use the latest and greatest software, the best stuff. I don't even know if, from that site if you can still get 2015. I have no idea. All right. When I taught this class a year ago, I was teaching 2017. So I had to say the same thing that I'm saying to you right now. Okay? All right. So you can see that's how you used to open up projects. And you can see how that's changed. Again, I'm not going to talk about that. The form designer hasn't really changed very much. Okay? So we've talked about this a little. We'll do some more talking about it tomorrow. All right. The code editor, we've looked at that a little. We'll look at that in more depth and breadth of coverage tomorrow. So again, we're going to build at least 3 applications tomorrow, of which you'll turn them in. Then I'm going to ask you to build 3 more of them, which I'm not going to ask you to turn in. The first 3 we'll build as a class. The next 3 I'll ask you to build. I'll give you, half an hour or so. All right? And if you're like, I just don't have a frickin' clue, then just don't do it. What I don't want is I don't want to look over and see somebody, I just can't do this stuff. It's funny because what Ms. Bruggeman was talking about, that's happened before. I gave this lecture at the school I was teaching at in Wisconsin, okay? But it was for a different programming language, but it was the first day of class. And I went upstairs when the class was over, and one of my students is sitting in there. She's like this. And I said, is anything wrong? She goes, no, I'm just dropping. After 50 minutes. I said, why? She goes, I'm never going to get this. She said, SH. And I said, it was 1 period. And those periods, we went an hour and 50 minutes. So it wasn't even as long as yours. And she said, I'm just never going to get it. No, I'm going into accounting. Okay. I mean, I didn't try to stop her. It's her right to do whatever she wants to do. But even if it takes a little while to understand. I remember when I was talking with my daughter, we were talking about driver's education. Okay, and when I was in driver's ed, they had it in high school. I don't know if they do that here or not, but they had it in high school. And First day of class, we got done. Mr. Schwartz was my teacher. And he said, okay, we've got 7 drivers in here. We've got Mr. Scott. That was how we, and I was embarrassed. And when we finished, he said, you are now the best driver in here. Okay? Which I thought was kind of like, which is the best kind of poop? You know, cat poop, dog poop, whatever. It's still poop. I wasn't a good driver, but I was better than the other clods who were in there. This clod was better than those clods. All right? Okay. The Solution Explorer, I showed you a little of it. This will be adding stuff to it as we go on. The different windows that are in here. Okay? Again, I'm not going to expect you right now to memorize that stuff. I showed you how to build a project. I showed you how to run a project. Okay? This is upgrading from earlier editions. That's no big thing. You just run it through a filter to do that. So that's it. So we have talked about everything that's in here. So again, you know now what we'll do tomorrow, correct? All right. With whatever time is left, then tomorrow, okay, we'll go in and do the same kind of thing for Chapter 2.